Ryan had always trusted Lisa. Their marriage, though not without its ups and downs, had always seemed anchored by mutual respect. But lately something had shifted. It began with small things, the casual deflection when he asked about her weekend plans, the nervous flutter in her voice when she said, "Just a girls' trip." It was unlike Lisa to be evasive, and Ryan's instincts, honed over years of problem-solving at work, told him to pay attention. The morning of her departure was unusually crisp for May. Ryan stood in the driveway, watching as Lisa loaded her meticulously packed suitcase into the trunk of her silver sedan. "It's just 2 nights," she said, smiling over her shoulder. "We'll catch up when I'm back." "Of course," Ryan replied, forcing a smile. "Have fun with the girls." He kept his tone light, but his chest tightened when he noticed the suitcase. It was her designer luggage, the one she reserved for special occasions, not casual trips with friends. The detail gnawed at him. As Lisa drove off, Ryan returned to the kitchen, his coffee growing cold. He stared at his phone for a long moment before opening the location-sharing app they'd installed years ago for emergencies. It felt invasive, but something compelled him. When the app revealed Lisa's destination, a rural route miles away from the spa retreat she'd mentioned, Ryan's suspicion crystallized into certainty. That evening, Ryan couldn't focus. Memories played back in his mind, each adding weight to his growing unease. The late-night phone calls abruptly ended when he entered the room, the unfamiliar cologne scent on her scarf. He couldn't ignore the patterns anymore. A plan began to form. Early the next morning, Ryan took a personal day and drove toward the remote location. He parked his car at a safe distance from the cabin the app led him to, tucking it behind a cluster of trees. The property was secluded, surrounded by towering pines, and blanketed in quiet. From his vantage point, he could see the front porch clearly. An hour passed, then 2. Ryan's patience was rewarded when Lisa's car pulled up the gravel drive. She stepped out, looking effortlessly radiant in her casual outfit. It was the same carefree glow that had drawn him to her years ago. His heart sank as he watched a man, a tall, confident figure with a familiar air of smugness, open the cabin door and greet her with a kiss that was far too intimate for just friends. Ryan snapped photos, his hands steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within him. He filmed their interaction, documenting the truth he'd wished wasn't real. As he watched them disappear into the cabin, he felt a strange calm settle over him. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a wake-up call. Ryan knew then that he couldn't let this stand. He wouldn't act out of anger, but he would act decisively. Betrayal demanded justice, and Ryan was ready to deliver it. Ryan leaned back in his seat, gripping the steering wheel, his mind a tempest of emotions. From his vantage point behind the thick grove of pine trees, the picturesque cabin stood in stark contrast to the storm brewing within him. A faint wisp of smoke curled from the stone chimney, and sunlight dappled the roof shingles. A postcard-perfect scene that mocked the reality of his crumbling marriage. He adjusted the telephoto lens of his camera, focusing on the cabin door. Just as his nerves began to fray from the waiting, Lisa's silver sedan rolled into the gravel driveway. His stomach twisted as he watched her step out, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a casual grace that now seemed so deceitful. She looked comfortable, at ease, more so than she had in months. The sight stung. Then the door to the cabin opened, and Ryan's fears solidified. The man who emerged wasn't a stranger, it was Derek. Ryan recognized him from their social circles, charming, self-assured, the kind of man who thought rules didn't apply to him. His stomach churned as Derek wrapped Lisa in a warm embrace, their familiarity unmistakable. Ryan's hand tightened on the camera, capturing each frame as if pressing the shutter button would somehow make the scene less real. For a long moment, Ryan just watched. It wasn't just the kiss Derek pressed to Lisa's forehead or the way she smiled up at him. It was the subtle things, the way her body relaxed in his arms, the unspoken language between them. These were things she once shared with Ryan, and seeing them stolen by another man was like a punch to the gut. Brian lowered the camera, his mind racing. He had the evidence, but it wasn't enough to simply have proof. He needed clarity, needed to know what had driven Lisa to this betrayal. Was it boredom? A search for excitement? Or had she fallen out of love with him without ever saying the words? Surely the damage had not been complete. Determined, Ryan stepped out of his car, his movements deliberate and quiet. He circled the property, careful to remain hidden in the shadows of the trees. As he crept closer to the cabin, he could hear their voices faintly through the partially open windows. They were laughing, their conversation light and carefree, like two lovers enjoying a stolen moment away from the world. Ryan's breath hitched as Lisa's voice rang out. "This place is perfect, Derek. I wish we could stay longer." "We will soon enough," Derek replied. His tone was laced with confidence, as though their shared future was a foregone conclusion. "Once things are settled, there won't be any need to hide." The words burned. Settled. What did that mean? Divorce? Separation? Lisa hadn't even hinted at unhappiness, let alone made a move to end their marriage. Ryan's mind reeled, torn between fury and the cold clarity that had always served him in moments of crisis. He stepped back from the window, careful not to disturb the pine needles underfoot. Ryan retreated to his car, his heart pounding. He could confront them now, but it wouldn't be enough. There was more he needed to know. Conversations to overhear, plans to expose. His instincts told him there was a larger story here, one he wasn't yet fully privy to. Back in the car, he reviewed the footage he had captured. Every photo and video was crisp, detailed, and damning. But as much as he wanted to lash out, Ryan knew he had to stay calm. This was bigger than a single confrontation. His next move had to be as calculated as it was decisive. For now, he would let them bask in their illusion of secrecy. As Ryan drove away, he thought about the life he and Lisa had built together. The quiet evenings, the vacations, the laughter. All of it felt like a hollow echo now. Yet, amidst the grief and anger, there was a flicker of determination. Lisa and Derek might think they were orchestrating the perfect secret, but Ryan was already dismantling it piece by piece. The cool night air carried a sharp edge as Ryan stepped out of his car, his boots crunching softly against the gravel driveway of the secluded cabin. Above him, the moon hung low, its pale light casting long, eerie shadows across the property. The cabin stood resolute, the warm glow from its windows a sharp contrast to the chill creeping into Ryan's chest. He gripped the manila envelope tightly in one hand, the evidence within a weight he could almost feel. He hadn't planned to confront them so soon, but as he sat in his car replaying the videos on his phone, he realized there was no point in waiting. Each recorded laugh, every stolen kiss he had captured on film, only added fuel to the fire in his gut. They thought they were safe here, tucked away in their little bubble of lies. That illusion was about to shatter. Ryan climbed the short steps to the cabin door, his heart pounding with every step. He paused, fist hovering midair, and let out a slow, deliberate breath. He wasn't here to rage, he wasn't here to plead. He was here to deliver the truth with the kind of calm, measured precision that left no room for argument. 3 sharp knocks broke the stillness of the night. Inside he heard muffled voices, then hurried footsteps. The door opened, and Derek stood there, his casual arrogance crumbling into confusion, as he recognized Ryan. "Ryan? What the hell are you doing here?" Derek's voice was tight, his body instinctively blocking the view inside. "Step aside, Derek," Ryan said evenly, his tone carrying an edge that brooked no argument. "I'm not here to make a scene. I just want to talk." Derek hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. Ryan caught a glimpse of Lisa beyond him, her face draining of color as their eyes met. She was frozen mid-step, a wine glass in her hand trembling slightly. "Ryan," she began, her voice faltering. "Invite me in, or I'll make this conversation a lot more public than you'd like," Ryan said, his voice cold enough to freeze the air between them. Derek stepped back reluctantly, and Ryan walked in, his eyes immediately scanning the room. It was cozy, almost romantic, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table, a blanket draped over the couch where they'd clearly been sitting together moments before. The details struck him like tiny daggers, each one twisting deeper into his chest. Lisa set her glass down, her movements stiff and mechanical. "Brian, this isn't what it looks like," she said quickly, her voice wavering. Ryan raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a bitter smile. "Oh, really? Then I'm looking forward to hearing what it is." He tossed the envelope onto the coffee table, its weight landing with a resounding slap. "Go ahead, open it." Lisa hesitated, her eyes flicking to Derek, who stood rooted in place, his confidence completely stripped away. Slowly, she reached for the envelope and slid out the photographs and printouts. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them, each image more damning than the last. Her car in the driveway, her and Derek on the porch, their intimate embrace. The color drained from her face as she looked up at Ryan. "Ryan, No," he interrupted, his voice as sharp as a blade. "No excuses, no lies. I've had enough of both. I followed you because I knew something was wrong, and now I know exactly what." Lisa's eyes welled with tears, but Ryan didn't soften. He turned to Derek, who was trying to edge toward the door. "Don't even think about it," Ryan said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not walking out of here until you hear what I have to say." Derek froze, his expression shifting from fear to indignation. "Look, man, I didn't mean for this to happen." Ryan cut him off with a humorless laugh. "Didn't mean for it to happen, that's rich. You meant every second of it. You thought you could sneak around behind my back, take what isn't yours, and get away with it." Lisa stepped forward, her voice desperate. "Ryan, please, let me explain. It wasn't—" "Don't," Ryan said, his gaze piercing hers. "Don't insult me by pretending this is anything but what it is. You lied to me, Lisa. You betrayed everything we built together." Her tears began to fall, and for a brief moment, Ryan felt the weight of his love for her. But it wasn't enough to extinguish the fire of betrayal burning in his chest. "A lie. You had a choice," he continued, his voice steady but laced with pain. "You could have come to me, told me you were unhappy, worked with me to fix things. Instead, you chose deceit. You chose him." Derek cleared his throat, attempting to regain some composure. "Look, maybe we should all calm down." Ryan's glare silenced him instantly. "Calm down? Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just betray me, you betrayed someone who trusted you." Lisa sobbed quietly, sinking onto the couch, while Derek looked increasingly uncomfortable. Ryan straightened, his voice cold and deliberate. "This isn't over," he said, his gaze shifting between them. "I have everything I need to make sure everyone knows exactly who you both are. Enjoy what little time you have left in this fantasy, because when I'm done, there won't be a cabin or a relationship for either of you to hide in." Without another word, Ryan turned and walked out, leaving the door wide open behind him. The cold night air rushed in, chilling the room as Derek and Lisa sat in stunned silence, their illusion of safety shattered. Ryan drove away from the cabin, his grip on the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. The confrontation had drained him, but it was far from over. If anything, it was only the beginning. Lisa and Derek's stunned expressions were still fresh in his mind, and he knew the fallout from this betrayal would ripple far beyond the walls of that cabin. By the time Ryan reached the city, the first seeds of his plan had already begun to take root. He wasn't interested in revenge for revenge's sake. What he wanted was accountability, a reckoning that would force Lisa and Derek to face the consequences of their actions. They had dismantled the trust and love he'd spent years building. He wouldn't let them escape unscathed. The first step was gathering his thoughts. Ryan parked at a small cafe, a quiet spot where he could think without interruption. He ordered coffee and sat by the window, staring at the steaming cup as if the answers might surface in the dark liquid. He took out his phone, scrolling through the evidence he'd collected, photos, videos, and recorded conversations. Each one painted a damning picture, one he planned to share with their mutual connections. But there was a strategic element to this. Timing was everything. Lisa's family had always been close knit, her parents holding traditional values that prioritized loyalty and honesty. Her father, a retired Navy officer, was particularly stern when it came to integrity. Ryan decided they would be the first to know. They deserved to hear the truth from him, not through the grapevine or from Lisa's half-hearted confessions. He dialed their number and Lisa's mother answered on the second ring. "Ryan? Is everything all right?" "No, Jane," Ryan replied, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I need to talk to you and Robert. It's about Lisa." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came Jane's worried response. "What's happened?" "I think it's better if we speak in person," Ryan said. "Can I come by?" Within an hour, Ryan was sitting in their living room, the cozy space suddenly suffocating under the weight of the conversation. He didn't sugarcoat anything, presenting the evidence with a clinical precision that left no room for doubt. Jane's hand trembled as she passed the photos to Robert, whose face darkened with every passing second. "She said she was happy," Jane whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She said everything was fine." "She lied," Robert said flatly, his voice like stone. "And she'll answer for it." Ryan nodded. "I thought you should hear it from me. I'm filing for divorce, but before I do, I wanted you to know the full extent of what's happened." Robert leaned forward, his jaw tight. "Do what you have to, son. You have our support." The next step was addressing their friends, many of whom had been oblivious to the growing cracks in Ryan and Lisa's marriage. Ryan sent out a carefully worded message to their closest circle, attaching a few choice pieces of evidence to drive the point home. The responses were immediate and unanimous in their shock and support for him. "I can't believe this," one friend wrote. "She always seemed so devoted to you." "Derek, of all people? What a snake," another added. The court of public opinion was swift and harsh, and by the end of the day, Lisa's carefully constructed image as a loving wife had crumbled. Ryan felt a grim satisfaction in seeing the truth exposed, but he knew this was only a part of the fallout. The real consequences were yet to come. The following morning, Ryan met with his lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Grace Whitman. Grace had built her reputation on handling high-stakes divorces, and as Ryan laid out the situation, her sharp mind immediately began mapping out the legal strategy. "We'll file for divorce citing adultery," she said, her tone brisk. "Given the evidence you've collected, the court won't have any doubts about assigning fault. This will work in your favor for division of assets and any potential alimony discussions." Ryan nodded. "I want it to be as clear-cut as possible. I don't want her walking away thinking she's gotten away with this." "She won't," Grace assured him. "By the time we're done, she'll understand the full weight of her actions." The divorce proceedings began quickly, and news of the affair spread like wildfire through their shared social circles. Lisa's workplace became a minefield of whispers and judgmental glances, while Derek faced backlash from his own connections. The cozy retreat they had envisioned was now a public scandal, and the weight of humiliation began to press down on them. Lisa called Ryan several times, her messages alternating between tearful apologies and defensive justifications. He didn't answer. Her words meant nothing to him now. Not after what she had done. Derek, too, tried to reach out, attempting to downplay his role in the affair. But Ryan had no interest in hearing his excuses. He had made his position clear the night he confronted them, and he wasn't about to revisit the conversation. As the weeks passed, the fallout settled into a strange calm. Ryan moved forward, filing for divorce and focusing on rebuilding his life. He began to reconnect with old friends, rediscover hobbies he'd long set aside, and find solace in the steady rhythm of work. For Lisa and Derek, however, the nightmare continued. Their reputations were in tatters, their private shame now a public spectacle. Ryan had achieved what he set out to do, not through rage or vengeance, but through the unrelenting pursuit of truth. Betrayal, after all, had consequences, and Lisa and Derek were living proof of that. The morning sun filtered through Ryan's window, casting long streaks of light across the polished hardwood floor. It was the first time in weeks he felt the warmth of a new day, not just on his skin, but deep within. The emotional storm that had consumed him was finally beginning to settle, leaving a strange calm in its wake. Lisa was gone now. The divorce proceedings, though far from amicable, had moved swiftly thanks to the overwhelming evidence Ryan had presented. She had tried to negotiate, to salvage some piece of her dignity, but the court's judgment was clear. The betrayal was undeniable, and the consequences were hers to bear. Ryan walked to his kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee. He no longer felt the sting of seeing her favorite mug in the cupboard, or the faint traces of her perfume in the house. Those once painful reminders were becoming just that, reminders of a life he no longer inhabited. He was ready to move forward. The divorce settlement had been a defining moment. Lisa had pushed for leniency, trying to argue that their years of marriage and shared memories warranted a softer approach. But Ryan, firm yet fair, stood his ground. "You made your choice, Lisa," he'd said during their final meeting. "Now you have to live with it." The house, a symbol of the life they'd built, remained his. Lisa had wanted to take it, claiming she needed a fresh start, but Ryan saw through her attempts to hold on to the past while trying to move on with Derek. He couldn't allow her to rewrite the narrative of their shared history on her terms. The house was where he would begin his own fresh start, a home no longer overshadowed by deceit. As for Derek, he had faded into obscurity as quickly as he'd arrived. The fallout from their affair had tarnished his professional reputation, costing him several key clients. The man who had exuded confidence and charm now avoided eye contact with those who once admired him. Ryan didn't need to lift a finger. Derek's arrogance had been his undoing. But Ryan's journey wasn't just about watching others face the consequences of their actions. It was about reclaiming his own identity. The betrayal had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his marriage and himself. For too long, he had ignored the signs, convinced himself that their bond was unbreakable. Now, he saw the cracks for what they were. Opportunities for growth. He threw himself into projects that reignited his passions. The backyard, neglected during the final years of his marriage, became a canvas for his creativity. He built a garden, its vibrant flowers a reminder that beauty could bloom even after devastation. He took up photography, a hobby he'd abandoned when life had grown too busy. Through the lens, he found a new way to see the world, one frame at a time. Ryan also reconnected with people who mattered. Friends he hadn't seen in years welcomed him back with open arms. Dinners, hikes, and long conversations filled the spaces that had once felt hollow. He realized that love and connection didn't have to be confined to one relationship. They could exist in the bonds he shared with others. The most surprising transformation came in his understanding of forgiveness. Ryan didn't forgive Lisa or Derek for their betrayal. That was a wound too deep to erase. But he did forgive himself for the trust he'd placed in Lisa, for the time he'd spent clinging to a broken marriage, for the nights he doubted his own worth. That forgiveness was the key to unlocking his future. One evening, as Ryan stood in his backyard, the sky ablaze with the colors of a setting sun, he felt a profound sense of peace. The shadows of the past no longer loomed as large. He realized that the betrayal, as painful as it had been, had given him something unexpected. A chance to rebuild, to rediscover, to reimagine what his life could be. The echoes of Lisa's laughter and Derek's smug grin were fading, replaced by the hum of possibility. Ryan didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid. He was ready to embrace it, scars and all. As the evening deepened, Ryan raised his camera and snapped a photo of the horizon. It wasn't just a picture. It was a promise to himself. The past was behind him, but the future, that was wide open, waiting to be written.